The courtroom smelled like polished wood and tension. I could feel it pressing in from every angle, heavy and insistent. People were seated in neat rows, their whispers filling the gaps between the sharp clack of my heels against the floor. And there he was, Marcus, leaning back in his chair with that smug half-smile that used to make me weak in the knees. Not anymore. The confidence in his tone made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Your Honor," he announced to the room, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I am confident we'll resolve this matter quickly and fairly." Quick and fair, huh? That word choice had always been his signature, an effortless mix of charm and arrogance designed to make you doubt your own instincts. I gripped the edge of the bench and drew a slow, steadying breath. Years of preparation, of careful planning and legal advice had led me to this moment. I wouldn't let him rattle me. Not here, not now. Every eye in the room was on us, waiting, and I would make sure they saw exactly who I was, and exactly who he was beneath the polished facade. And my name is Denise Harris, and if you'd asked me 10 years ago where I thought I'd be today, this courtroom would not have been on the list. I'd built my consulting firm from scratch, learned to trust my instincts, and thought I knew how to recognize a good partner. I believed in people, or at least, I believed in what they showed me. That's how Marcus slipped in. I met him at a charity gala, one of those glittering Atlanta evenings where everyone was trying a little too hard to impress. He had that easy smile, the kind that suggested he was listening when, in reality, he was calculating. I thought he was impressed by my intelligence, the way I navigated conversations with confidence and purpose. I was flattered, intrigued, a little cautious, but cautiously drawn in. Marcus knew exactly how to make you feel like you were the only person in the room. He remembered details about my work, asked thoughtful questions, complimented my taste in books, in clothes, even in wine. Every move felt personal, like he was crafting an intimacy that belonged to us alone. I never suspected the design behind it, never questioned the charm that seemed to orbit him. It wasn't until months later that the first red flags appeared, subtle things at first, passing comments about money or status that felt off, but easily brushed aside. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs much earlier in our relationship. But at the time, I wanted to believe in him. I wanted to believe in us. And that trust, my trust, was exactly what Marcus had been planning to exploit all along. When Marcus proposed, it was exactly like a scene from a movie, except I didn't realize I was the one writing the script. He knelt in my grandmother's garden, ring in hand, voice full of promises and that charm I'd once believed was genuine. I remember the flutter of excitement, the way my chest tightened at the thought of a future that felt secure, loving, and real. "I want to spend my life with you, Denise," he said, eyes bright, and I let myself believe it. For a moment, the warnings I'd ignored vanished behind the sparkle of the ring. Of course, there was talk of a prenuptial agreement. I'd handled my grandmother's estate and my own assets carefully for years. I knew the importance of protecting what was mine. Marcus waved it off at first, smiling, claiming it was unnecessary. I insisted. "Of course, darling. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'm not marrying you for your money," he said. And I believed him, or at least I allowed myself to believe it because I wanted the moment to be about love, not contracts. Signing the prenup felt clinical, but necessary. Tanya, my attorney, guided me through every page, explaining protections, legal terminology, and scenarios I'd never considered. I left the office that day with a sense of relief and control, believing I'd done my part to safeguard my life and legacy. Little did I know, Marcus had his own plans, carefully hidden behind smiles and whispered assurances, and the legal shield I thought would be unnecessary was about to become my strongest weapon. Receiving my grandmother's inheritance should have been a quiet, private victory. Instead, it became another stage for Marcus's performance. I had always admired her foresight, how she built her estate carefully, documented every detail, and made sure her legacy would protect those who truly deserved it. When the funds transferred to my account, I felt both gratitude and a quiet sense of responsibility. Marcus, of course, reacted differently. The moment he saw the numbers, his eyes widened, not with awe or respect, but with calculation. $2.8 million, he repeated, as if tasting the weight of it. "Denise, we're rich." I nodded politely, masking the unease curling in my stomach. This wasn't joy. This was him already counting, already planning how to turn what was mine into something that served only him. It started with small hints, offhand comments about what he could buy, suggestions about extravagant trips, even casual remarks about friends who had made fortunes overnight. At first, I tried to dismiss it, telling myself he was just excited, that I might be overthinking. But the pattern became impossible to ignore. He had no curiosity about the legacy itself, no interest in honoring what my grandmother had built. His fascination was purely financial, and it grew bolder by the day. I remember one evening, watching him leaf through the investment statements I'd left out, pretending to review them, but really measuring possibilities. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from clarity. The person I had married wasn't the charming man from the gala. He was a strategist, and my inheritance was his target. I realized then that the legal protections I had in place weren't just precaution. They were my first line of defense in a battle I hadn't fully seen coming. The moment I discovered Marcus's plan, the calm I had been clinging to cracked like thin ice. I stumbled across an email, careless, almost mocking in its clarity, between him and someone I didn't know. The words were precise, cold, and undeniable. Divorce, asset division, legal loopholes, and a timeline that matched events I had assumed were coincidental. I sat there, reading and rereading, trying to convince myself it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew the truth. Marcus had been plotting this all along. Every charming word, every carefully curated gesture, had been part of a strategy designed to make me feel safe, distracted, and trusting, while he mapped out how to take everything. It wasn't just emails. I overheard conversations, subtle comments that suddenly made sense in a horrifying new light. Friends and colleagues he had charmed? All pieces in a puzzle I hadn't realized I was part of. I felt anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of vindication all at once. He had underestimated me, the one person who knew how to protect her life and her assets. I called Tanya immediately, my voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline. "We need to act," I said, and she didn't hesitate. That's when I finally filed for divorce myself, reclaiming control and stepping out from the trap he had carefully laid. I knew the road ahead would be tense, public, and humiliating for him, but also necessary. And for the first time in months, I felt the quiet thrill of strategy. This wasn't just about defending my inheritance. It was about asserting that I wouldn't be manipulated, deceived, or outsmarted. The courtroom fell into a hush as I stood, envelope in hand, every eye turning toward me. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with the steady force of resolve. I approached the judge's bench, each step deliberate, my heels clicking against the polished floor like a metronome counting the seconds until truth would speak. "I believe the court needs to review this document before proceeding with any asset division discussions," I said, placing the envelope in front of Judge Freeman. My voice was calm, measured, carrying the weight of preparation and certainty. The judge lifted an eyebrow, his gaze shifting from me to Marcus, who was now visibly stiff, his earlier confidence faltering. Marcus's attorney, Leonard Brooks, leaned forward, his expression a mix of surprise and panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The envelope wasn't just paper. It was a barrier between Marcus and the life he thought he could claim. Tanya had advised me to let the moment speak for itself, to let the law reveal what was rightfully mine, and it did. Whispers rippled through the gallery as the judge picked up the document, flipping through pages with a deliberate patience that felt like a countdown. I kept my hands folded in front of me, my breathing steady. Marcus's smirk had disappeared, replaced by a flicker of unease, then panic, as he realized the extent of his miscalculation. This was the turning point, the moment where the illusion shattered. The man who had manipulated, charmed, and lied could no longer hide behind his arrogance. All that remained was the truth, documented and undeniable. And I would make sure the courtroom, and Marcus himself, witnessed every word. Marcus's face froze, or at least, the composure he'd worn so effortlessly for years. His jaw tightened, and I could see the panic rising like heat from a flame he hadn't planned for. Leonard Brooks, usually smooth and commanding, was now scrambling beside him, flipping through legal papers with the kind of desperation that only comes when someone realizes the rug has been pulled out from under them. "Denise, you never told me this was some kind of legal trap," Marcus whispered, voice sharp, trembling with disbelief. His bravado had evaporated, replaced with a raw, exposed vulnerability. It was almost satisfying. Almost. I kept my expression neutral, letting the truth of the prenup speak louder than anything I could say. Leonard tried to argue. His sentences rushed, stammering over points that had clearly not been anticipated. Your Honor, disagreement. There are technicalities. The words fell flat. The judge's gaze was stern, unwavering, and Leonard faltered under it, just as Marcus had faltered under mine. I stayed seated calm, letting the tension build, feeling the energy of the courtroom shift. Whispers filled the air like static electricity, everyone sensing the collapse of Marcus's carefully constructed facade. The man who had tried to control, manipulate, and charm his way into my life was now exposed, vulnerable, and publicly undone. For the first time in months, I allowed a quiet, satisfied smile to cross my face. Justice wasn't just happening, it was unfolding in real time, and Marcus was finally seeing the consequences of underestimating me. I took a slow, deliberate breath, knowing this was the moment to lay everything out, not out of vindictiveness, but to make sure the truth was clear. When I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I began, my voice steady. I consulted with my attorney about whether it was protected. Every asset, every account, every investment was reviewed and classified as separate property under Georgia law. Marcus shifted in his seat, unease flickering across his face. Leonard's jaw tightened, realizing he couldn't argue against the clarity of what I was saying. I continued, keeping my tone calm, precise, and authoritative. A prenuptial agreement isn't just a formality. It's a legally binding contract. It protects separate property, ensures transparency, and prevents exploitation. My inheritance was never subject to division because the law, and this agreement, explicitly safeguards it. I watched Marcus swallow hard. The confidence that had filled the room just minutes ago now dissolved. This wasn't a loophole, I said firmly. It was foresight. It was the result of careful planning, consultation with experts, and the wisdom passed down to me. No amount of charm, persuasion, or manipulation can override what the law protects. The gallery was silent, the tension thick, as the weight of my words settled over the courtroom. This was more than just a personal victory. It was a statement. I wasn't just defending assets. I was defending the principle that preparation, knowledge, and integrity mattered. And in that moment, Marcus realized that all the schemes he'd plotted were powerless against someone who had never underestimated the importance of protecting herself. Judge Freeman cleared his throat, the sound slicing through the courtroom like a verdict waiting to be spoken. I felt a pulse of anticipation, a quiet certainty that all the preparation, all the careful planning, was about to pay off. After reviewing the prenuptial agreement submitted by Ms. Harris, the judge said, his gaze sweeping the room, "It is clear that the agreement is valid and enforceable under Georgia law. The assets in question are protected, and any claims by Mr. Harris are hereby denied." Marcus's mouth opened, then closed, a desperate gesture that said more than words ever could. Leonard Brooks shifted uncomfortably, trying to recover, but the law wasn't on their side. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the energy of the moment electric. I kept my posture straight, my hands folded calmly in front of me, letting the ruling sink in fully. And furthermore, the judge continued, any outstanding financial obligations related to Mr. Harris's actions are assigned to him, including the debt accrued in attempting to claim assets not legally his. This serves as a reminder that manipulation and deceit have consequences. I allowed a small, controlled smile to form. It counted as an expensive lesson in reading legal documents before signing them, yes, but it also counted as proof that foresight, diligence, and a refusal to be underestimated could triumph, even against someone as cunning and manipulative as Marcus. The gavel came down, final and decisive. My heart felt light, the tension finally released, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to imagine a future unburdened by fear or betrayal. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers trailing behind like echoes of a storm finally passed. Marcus was gone, his reputation in tatters, his debts mounting, and his carefully constructed charm exposed for what it truly was. I stayed for a moment, letting it all sink in, the fear, The uncertainty, the fight, and now the victory. I thought of my grandmother, her wisdom guiding me even now. She had taught me to plan, to protect, to never underestimate the value of foresight. That guidance had carried me through, and now it felt right to honor it by giving back. The Harris Foundation was born that week, a space for women to learn, protect themselves, and gain the tools I had relied on. The nightmare was finally over, and Marcus's true nature had been exposed for everyone to see. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace, not just relief, but power, clarity, and purpose. Did you enjoy the story? If so, hit like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe. Thanks for watching Revenge with Keisha. See you next time.